There is in every agency now on the security and intelligence side an acknowledgement that domestic violent extremism is the most pressing threat facing the homeland in the US, and that is often true overseas as well, or it's the fastest growing threat. So we have for far too long kept our eyes trained on forms of terrorism and extremism that don't look like the kind of online radicalization we're seeing now, which often is through memes or through jokes or online content that is hidden, not easily accessible. And we can't keep interrupting that type of radicalization with a focus on groups or infiltration or surveillance and monitoring, as we've done in the past.
If we were able to arrest or surveil our way out of this problem, we wouldn't see the rates of hate incidents and political violence rising in this country like they are. I think it's pretty clear that in addition to law enforcement, we also need to be looking much further upstream. We need to be addressing this problem before it even emerges as a problem. We need to be looking at the roots of extremism and political violence in our communities and in the conditions of our communities that allow radicalization to happen. What we need is to reduce the fertile ground that extremism grows out of in the first place. There are also some very common patterns that we see throughout radicalization cases. It's very common for people to express grievances, which then get directed towards scapegoats. It's also very common for people to experience what's called status threat. In other words, when somebody feels, whether consciously or unconsciously, that they have a privileged position, which they might lose, it's very common for them to go seeking a scapegoat to blame for that sense of insecurity. Trauma is associated with radicalization through a dynamic that we call compensatory control. So in other words, when a person's life is thrown into upheaval, they will go looking for ways to reassert a feeling of control. And some people do that through unhealthy means, like looking for scapegoats or joining extremist groups. In the past, a person had to be very lucky or very unlucky, depending on how you want to look at it, to encounter an extremist recruiter or to consume a high level of extremist propaganda. So it was very difficult for a person with the vulnerabilities for radicalization to meet the kind of context or contacts that were going to allow them to actually channel those problems into political or religious extremism. Nowadays, that's no longer the case. We can't log on to our computers, practically, without encountering some kind of propaganda that's attempting to recruit us towards an extremist viewpoint.
I created PERIL because I had spent 20 years working in the field of comparative education, looking at school-based responses to resurgent far-right extremism in Germany in the post-unification context. And I sort of learned from those 20 years that there are approaches that are rooted in a whole of community, whole of society, whole of government, holistic way that comes at it from 9 or 12 different agencies with the arts and education, with the elderly and health and human services all being involved, and not just security approaches that are focused really on crisis mitigation. So as the extremist spectrum in the domestic side here in the US started to ramp up over the last 5 or 6 years, it was really distressing to see that we didn't have those creative ideas, and that there was a need for that. And so the lab was founded to kind of create and test ideas to equip communities with tools for change.
We founded PERIL in part to address a gap that we saw in the world of preventing violent extremism. There are a lot of resources and there is a lot of attention that's paid to securitized solutions to these problems, and that's appropriate. However, we saw that there was not enough work being done in primary prevention, upstream work in other words. We're trying to reduce the conditions that give rise to radicalization and to extremism so that we don't have to be so reliant on securitized approaches.
field of preventing violent extremism has historically been dominated by law enforcement and security approaches. And PERIL is really different because we start from an upstream primary prevention approach with an aim of stopping people from becoming radicalized before they go down those rabbit holes.
PERIL takes a non-securitized approach to this work. We think that while there's a very important role for law enforcement and security to play, we can't arrest our way out of this situation. We need to address the roots of radicalization. We need to reduce the fertile ground that extremism grows out of.
It's really important to think about the solution to violent extremism, or the solutions to violent extremism, as rooted in as many different lenses and approaches as possible. So we really prioritize having staff who bring different personal, professional, and disciplinary lenses, because that's how you get creative ideas and out-of-the-box solutions to counter problems that haven't been solved with more traditional approaches.
PERIL's at the cutting edge of prevention resilience education. We do a lot of work in what's called attitudinal inoculation. Attitudinal inoculation is a hybrid of media literacy and counter-propaganda work. And what it does is it empowers people with the skills and the resources that they need to recognize and resist the manipulative strategies of propaganda. This is an especially effective technique, partly because it's ideologically agnostic. This is not about trying to turn conservatives into progressives or progressives into liberals or change anyone's religion. This is purely about recognizing the styles of manipulation that propaganda uses that hijack our instincts and our emotions to get us to behave in ways that are destructive to our communities and that are against our own individual best interests.
Our founding partner is the Southern Poverty Law Center. They helped us launch the lab with a question really about what it would take to create a scalable solution to the problem of radicalization. And that helped us generate a lot of ideas in some of our early discussions about what kind of out-of-the-box ideas we could dream up. And they remain really our foundational partner today. They're a core partner in our work in communities and our work to equip communities with tools to recognize and respond more effectively and create off-ramps. But we have a number of other foundation partners, U.S. federal government partners, funding from other international partners as well, across the spectrum of funders interested in specific issues like anti-Semitism, but also in specific approaches like education. We find that we need a diverse range of funders to address the problems from a lot of different perspectives.
We've done a lot of great work with Jigsaw. Jigsaw is the think tank wing of Google. They've supported a great deal of this attitudinal inoculation work, and as a result, we've had successful studies that show that we can use these techniques to reduce the credibility of propagandists who work in areas like scientific racism, male supremacy, COVID denialism, and anti-vax conspiracy theories. To us, success is defined by the communities. It's up to the communities to determine what looks like a successful, inclusive, safe environment. A place where everyone feels as though they truly belong. Everyone has a stake in the health and the future of the community. And everyone's needs and concerns can be addressed adequately.
Success is measured in a lot of different ways. I mean, first of all, we test everything we do, and so at a bare minimum, you have to do no harm. And so we want to make sure that none of the interventions we do backfire or cause people to dig in their heels more. But ultimately, it's beyond that. Success looks like better democratic resilience, better community cohesion and social cohesion, more trust, a bigger sense of belonging, and ideas within communities on how to tap into their own sense of expertise and be better equipped to address and off-ramp individuals who are already expressing kind of early warning signs. In the long run, of course, longitudinally, we want to know that people who use our interventions have been able to intervene, have been able to stop a person from going further down the pathway toward violence. We want to know that they feel more equipped, more confident, that they know where to get more help, and ultimately that there's less violence in their communities as a result.
This work has to be evidence-based. It has to be assessed rigorously and deeply. We can't risk blowback. We can't risk backfiring. This work is too serious.
I often say that I work in the most rewarding side of this field because it is a dark field and it can be really distressing to constantly be monitoring and reporting on violence and on extreme ideas and hateful content. But what we do is produce evidence of how you prevent that, and we have really good evidence. In every single project that we've done, every intervention tool, we produce statistically significant evidence to date that it's effective in one capacity or another, and often in multiple capacities. So we have found, for example, that you can equip parents and caregivers with tools to intervene effectively, to be more informed, to know how to get more help, and to have more confidence about what they're seeing in their own children's lives in as little as 7 minutes of reading. We have found that after 3 months later, those same parents and caregivers end up, 6% of them report that they actually actively used the tools to prevent somebody from radicalizing. 11% of them said that they actually joined a group or started a group to discuss online content and radicalization in their own community. So we're finding, and then a much bigger numbers of people remember the content, found it useful, or discussed it with a loved one. So we're seeing really strong impacts even from our first 3-month check of whether this has an impact down the road. And we think that the evidence will show that communities are able to do a lot of on-site intervention if they're equipped with the right tools.